So one of the things that shows up on a lot of section trumpet auditions is Bizet's Carmen Prelude. The reason that this piece is asked, many people think, is just for low register playing, and it is a low excerpt. But let's say, for instance, that this excerpt was up an octave. Then what would it be about? I think that's the consideration you want to have. Because if you consider that this is actually a lyrical tune, then the consideration for whether or not it's low kind of goes out the window. And ultimately, shouldn't that be our goal as trumpet players, to just not be thinking about the technique? So ideally, these things do serve each other. So we think musically, then we're sending a musical command to our bodies, versus thinking technically and sending technical commands. Is at the end of the day, we want to be able to enjoy the music. And when we do that, it's what's conveyed to the audience. And even in an audition, you have an audience. If you think of the audition as some kind of hurdle to jump through, then that's the way that it's going to sound when you play. If you think of it as an opportunity for a musical performance, then it has a much better chance of sounding that way. So when it comes to working on the Carmen Prelude, right, if your sound is warm and inviting and full at all the dynamics that are required in this, then I'm going to be interested. Second of all, I'm listening for pitch. Pitch in the low register can be a little unforgiving in a different way than the rest of the instrument because the slots are so wide. So the third thing is going to be the timing, or the rhythmic stability, so that you're really staying steady with the eighth note pulse at all times. Many players, a common mistake that I hear is players coming in late after the rests in the second and fourth bars of the excerpt in particular. And once they screw that up, I've kind of checked out, which is maybe a little brutal. But when you have to listen to, auditions for an entire day, that becomes a very crucial thing. It's a crucial requirement of playing in an orchestra, the rhythmic stability. And so you demonstrate that in an audition. Yes, you can play musically and still stay in time. The other thing that I'm listening for in this particular excerpt is the lyricism. Is this person playing lyrically? And part of the stylistic consideration is to recognize that this tune is played in unison with trumpet 1 and the cello section. And so for me, playing it as a candidate, I like to go for playing a little bit longer on my releases, and then additionally playing with no vibrato. We'll let the cello section take care of the vibrato, on top of the fact that it shows that you recognize this is a unison with the first trumpet. And when we're playing unisons, generally you don't want two people playing with vibrato. The first player may opt to play with some or without. That's their prerogative. But if you demonstrate a solid approach, no one can fault you for that. If they do, they may say, can you play it again, and this time with vibrato? And of course, that's way easier to do, I think, than to demonstrate the control in the low register, because we don't want to confuse vibrato with instability in the sound. It's very easy to do that. So when you play solid, I think you're creating, in my opinion, a much better picture of your ability in the low register. So some ways to work on the stability in the low register. First of all, whenever there's a wobble in your sound that you don't intend, it means that something's grabbing the air that doesn't need to be there. Most of the time, that's something in your throat or something, but really you should visualize yourself as being a giant tube of air with lips on the end. And so if anything besides your lips is trying to vibrate the air column or help the air do something, it will create that wobble. It's important to think the opposite of tension, which for me is thinking release or relax. We want to find ways of finding the stability in the sound and kind of taking the frets off of the trumpet, if you like. So practicing this excerpt sung and then mouthpiece buzzed and then played helps a lot. But I've also found that practicing this excerpt just on the lead pipe helps me with that stability. If you don't have the drum for the first pitch, obviously you can just play an E. That will do. hopefully that's pretty stable. If not, I can even try it on just the lead pipe. So I've taken the tuning slide out of the trumpet. So I can tell in doing that I'm already trying to grab when I get down to second valve B. To me, smoothing the air out when it wobbles is about more intentional direction, more thinking about the airflow rate rather than just airflow as a concept, like something that's intangible. It's much more, I think, practical for me to think about how it's moving forward. So okay, and that second bar should be dee da dee da dee, dee, so that you're really making sure you hold the full value of the note. So another consideration of this is to think about how to finger the excerpt, because we do have a low E flat concert. So low E flat concert on the B flat trumpet can be achieved by extending the third slide a good bit. And sometimes some instruments will also need some first slide. So you have a really long throw for your slides to make sure that that low E flat concert is in tune. Now, there's two different ways to navigate this on the B flat trumpet. One is to leave the third slide extended for the duration of the excerpt. This is my preferred way because I'm able to manage the pitch at all times on just about every note. It does make the trumpet into a little bit of a trombone. There's a joke in there somewhere, but we need to recognize that we have to play in tune. And one of the common things that I hear, sitting on audition committees, if you hear 100 trumpet players that have prepared this for an audition, you might hear 5 people play it in tune. It's that exceptional. The reason for that is it stands out because most people don't listen. And so if you feel like you're playing it in tune, I invite you to record yourself. If you listen back on your phone, you can turn tonal energy on and have it running while you're listening to the excerpt play back. And it'll tell you really quick how close you are. I think you should be within 10 cents or less on any given note. And I try to make my goal on this plus or minus 5 cents. And if I can do that, then I know I'm in control of my instrument, which I think is also an obvious thing that you want to demonstrate in an audition. You're allowed to make mistakes, but if your margin of error is pretty narrow, then that's also something that's going to help you stand out in an audition. Remember, mistakes are not just missing a note or cracking a note. Many times you crack a note because the note before was out of tune. So if I start to ride high, like in the upper register, and then I go for a higher note, that note's going to split because I was sharp already. So the miss isn't the actual missed note, it's the stuff that comes before. So it's no different when you're playing in the low register. Things start to lose the color in the sound, or the articulation is fuzzy, or it's just sounds off. Chances are it's because your pitch wavered. So the first thing is establishing that really great air, right? When the air is stable, then you have a chance to control the pitch a lot better because the airflow rate is a constant then. Like you're constantly releasing it in real time. A lot of times we think about just blowing the air in a way that isn't considerate of the fact that it needs to keep moving forward. So the other way of navigating that low F is to, instead of having, I like to have my third dump slide pulled out too, because then my main, when you start to extend the third slide out, it begins to play a little bit vertically this way. And we don't want it to do that because that means there's less compression in the slide. And so it's going to have a lot more deviation in terms of response, sound quality. So something like that. So if you play an instrument that doesn't have that third dump slide on the end, like I know a lot of Yamahas do, you have to figure out a way of setting it so that you have the slide out long enough, and many times the slides go further than you actually need to play a low F. So I've seen people kind of affix a pencil to the brace right here next to the tuning slide, and then another pencil over here to kind of create some kind of a stop situation so they know exactly where the low F is. But checking the length of that third slide to make sure that the low F is in tune is a bit of a trick also. So one of the ways you can do that, there's two ways, and you can choose which one you want to do. So when I do the 2 and 3 G, it's just a scotch high, right? You could also check the low C. So I can hear that that's also a little high. So that means my slides aren't out far enough for this. So I'm going to make the adjustment. You can see when I'm fingering, which should be 2 and 3, I'm fingering it third. I have to pull my slide in a little bit, otherwise it's going to be too low if I use the same length of slide that I would use for low F. And if you notice, I am also, maybe you can't see it, I don't know, I'm not watching myself while I'm playing this, but you may need to use some first slide for the low F or E flat concert if you like. And then, you know, show that measure again. Right, it's a little bit more stable versus the alternative where you have the third slide out and people do this. Which, you know, you can make that work too. I just think that for me, I've gotten used to doing it with that extension and I've had pretty good results. So that's why I stick with it. But if you can make that slide come in and out quick enough without there being a hitch or a response problem, then more power to you. I think I have less throw with the third slide when I'm fingering 3 to 1, 2, and 3 versus 2 and 3 to 1, 2, and 3 with slides all the way out and then come back in. You know, it's a little bit less reliable for me. And part of it is I got, you know, large hands. I don't know. Just the less I move, generally, the better, less clumsy I am. I hope that's helpful for you. And let me know in the comments below if you have any questions or comments, positive or negative. I'm all ears.